Rosemary had everything: a loving husband, 2 beautiful sons, and a life most women prayed for. But behind every smile was a secret, and behind every promise, a lie. One trip, one fall, one moment changed everything. When she opened her eyes after months in a coma, she woke up to a miracle, or perhaps a curse. She could speak languages she'd never known, understand words that were never meant for her ears. And with every word came a truth that would shatter her world and rebuild her into something stronger. This is the story of the tongues of truth. A story of betrayal, awakening, and the silent power of revenge. Rosemary's mornings were a melody of laughter and sunlight. The smell of fried eggs filled the kitchen as her 2 boys, Joshua and Daniel, chased each other around the table. Keith, her husband, kissed her cheek, quickly, almost distractedly, before scrolling through his phone. "Another early meeting?" she asked with a smile. He nodded, eyes still on the glowing screen. Rosemary didn't notice the name flashing on it, Pearl. To her, life was perfect. A loving home, healthy children, a husband with a good job. She hummed as she packed the boys' lunchboxes, whispering a short Yoruba prayer under her breath. But Keith's mind was elsewhere. A text blinked, "Miss you already." He replied quickly before sliding the phone into his pocket. That morning the sun seemed brighter than usual, the laughter louder, the warmth stronger. It was one of those mornings people later remember as the last time everything felt normal. If only Rosemary knew that the perfect rhythm of her mornings was about to fall silent. Saturday mornings were sacred to Rosemary. She stood by the sidelines, cheering as Joshua kicked the ball toward the goal. Other mums waved flags, gossiping between shouts of encouragement. "She's always smiling," one whispered. Another sighed, if only she knew about Keith and Pearl. Their words floated on the breeze, reaching ears that didn't want to believe. Rosemary laughed with pride when her son scored, raising her hands to the sky. She waved at Keith, who stood across the field, phone pressed to his ear again. "Work call," he mouthed. Later she offered snacks to the other mums, unaware that their pitying smiles weren't for her generosity, but for her innocence. In the stands, one of them muttered, "It's always the ones who trust the most that get hurt the deepest." But the game that day wasn't the only one being played. That evening, the dining table felt too big. The boys chatted about school, their voices filling the silence Keith left behind. "Daddy working late again," Rosemary told them gently. She set his plate aside, covered it, and waited. An hour passed, then 2, finally a message, "Don't wait up, long meeting." She smiled sadly, whispering, "He works so hard for us." But across town, Keith wasn't in a meeting. He sat with Pearl at a candlelit table, laughing freely, the same laugh Rosemary once fell in love with. Back home, Rosemary watched a family movie alone, her phone beside her like an unanswered question. Sometimes betrayal doesn't arrive with noise, it slips quietly into routine. Monday morning, Rosemary decided to surprise Keith with lunch. She wore a bright yellow dress, carrying his favorite jollof rice in a basket. At the office, the receptionist blinked in surprise. "Oh, Mrs. Keith, he's in a meeting with Pearl." The name tugged at something inside her, but she smiled politely and waited. When the door opened, Keith looked startled. Pearl stood behind him, lipstick too red for a colleague's lunch hour. "Rosie, you didn't tell me you were coming," Keith said quickly. Pearl added, "He talks about you all the time." The receptionist looked away, unable to meet Rosemary's eyes. Rosemary handed Keith the food, her voice soft. "Just wanted to make sure you eat. Trust is heavy, it only takes one crack for the whole bridge to tremble." A few weeks later, Keith suggested a weekend camping trip. "Let's get away, just the 4 of us," he said, eyes tired but voice warm. Rosemary's heart leapt, maybe things were getting better. She packed snacks, extra blankets, and a camera. The boys were thrilled. The forest welcomed them with the scent of rain and wild earth. Laughter echoed between the trees as they set up a tent and roasted corn by the fire. Keith held her hand under the stars. "I've missed this," he said. For the first time in months, she believed him. The night ended with soft songs and quiet prayers. In the darkness, a branch cracked somewhere in the woods, but Rosemary only smiled, thinking it was the wind. She didn't know that by morning, her world would never be the same again. The night sky stretched like a dark blanket stitched with silver stars. The campfire crackled as Rosemary told the boys one of her grandmother's Yoruba tales about courage and truth. Their laughter danced with the sparks. Keith smiled, but his phone glowed again. He stepped away, pretending to check the tent ropes. The name on the screen read Pearl. "Wish you were here instead," the message said. He typed a reply, quick and guilty, before sliding the phone back into his pocket. Rosemary watched him from afar, her smile fading slightly. Maybe it was the way the firelight flickered across his face, or maybe, somewhere deep inside, she already sensed the storm. When he returned, he kissed her forehead. "Everything's fine," he whispered. And she wanted to believe him. The wind rustled through the trees like whispers from another world, and in that soft wind, something shifted, not in the forest but in their marriage. By sunrise, the forest would keep a secret it never meant to hold. Morning came bright and peaceful. The boys raced to the stream with laughter that echoed through the woods. Rosemary followed, camera in hand, wanting to capture their joy. But near the stream, the earth was wet from the night's rain. She slipped on a smooth rock, one step, one scream, then silence. Her head struck the ground with a dull thud. Keith's shout tore through the calm, "Rosemary!" He rushed to her side, shaking, panic blinding him. The boys cried as he dialed emergency services, his voice breaking with fear. Her eyes fluttered, then closed. Her breathing slowed until only the rustle of leaves answered him. When the paramedics arrived, her body was limp, her pulse faint. Keith rode with her, gripping her hand, whispering prayers he hadn't said in years. She didn't know it yet, but her mind was about to open to a world beyond language, beyond lies. Bright lights, cold air machines beeping steadily. Dr. Samuel stood at the foot of the hospital bed, eyes calm but thoughtful. "She's in a coma," he told Keith gently. Keith stared at his wife, pale and motionless, a small bandage across her forehead. "How long will it last?" "There's no way to know," Samuel said. "We just wait." Days turned into weeks. Rosemary's hair was brushed, her hands held, her body cleaned, but her mind drifted somewhere far away. Keith came daily at first, holding her hand, whispering stories, but his visits grew shorter, his guilt heavier. Dr. Samuel often stayed late, talking softly to her even when she couldn't hear. "You'll wake up when you're ready," he'd say. "The world's waiting for you." Outside her room, Keith took a call. "I can't talk now, Pearl," he hissed. "Not here." But the nurse heard him, so did Samuel. The hospital held more than one secret, and one of them was about to breathe again. Time lost its shape. Seasons changed outside her window, but inside, Rosemary floated in a timeless sea of darkness. Keith's visits faded. Sometimes he came with flowers, other times not at all. Pearl began to show up quietly, never when the boys were there, pretending to bring work papers for Keith. Dr. Samuel noticed. He didn't say anything, but his eyes told the truth. He saw through them. One night, a nurse left the radio playing softly beside Rosemary's bed. Spanish music drifted into the air. Something stirred in her mind, faint like a whisper, words she'd never heard before wrapped around her dreams. Inside the silence of her coma, something new was forming. Not pain, not fear, something waiting. And when Rosemary finally opened her eyes, she would no longer be the same woman who fell asleep. It was dawn when her fingers moved. Dr. Samuel almost dropped his coffee when the monitor beeped differently. He rushed to her side. "Rosemary, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered open. Light burned her vision, but slowly the world took shape, white walls, machines, and a familiar voice saying her name. Keith arrived minutes later, face pale with shock. He hugged her, tears in his eyes. "You're back," he whispered. But Rosemary didn't speak, not yet. Her gaze moved slowly around the room until she saw the nurse talking to another patient in Spanish. And though she didn't understand how, she understood every word. Her lips parted, her heart racing. Words that were foreign yesterday now made perfect sense. Dr. Samuel smiled. "Welcome back, Rosemary." She managed to whisper, voice trembling, I understand them." But Rosemary didn't yet realize the gift she woke up with would soon expose everything Keith had tried to hide. The first few days after Rosemary woke felt like a dream she couldn't fully remember. Her mind was foggy, but sounds were sharp, too sharp. Every beep, every whisper, every footstep seemed louder, clearer. When the nurse came in, speaking softly to a Spanish patient across the room, the words danced into her ears, smooth and familiar. She turned her head, eyes wide. She understood everything, every single word. Dr. Samuel walked in, clipboard in hand. "How are you feeling today?" he asked. She hesitated. "Doctor, why do I understand Spanish?" He blinked. "Do you speak it?" She shook her head. "I didn't, not before the fall." Samuel smiled, faintly intrigued. "The brain is a mystery, Rosemary. Sometimes trauma rewires us in strange ways." But deep inside, Rosemary felt something else, not confusion, but awakening. Something had been unlocked, and it wasn't done revealing itself. Rosemary had gained more than her consciousness back. She'd gained the power to hear the truth in any tongue. Dr. Samuel decided to test her new ability. He brought in a few books, one in Spanish, another in French, and one in Italian. "Read these," he said gently. Her eyes scanned the pages. The words flowed effortlessly. She could read them as if she'd studied them all her life. Samuel's eyes widened. "This is extraordinary." He spoke a few sentences in French, a language Rosemary had never even tried to learn. Without hesitation, she replied perfectly. When he left the room, she sat silently, heart pounding. "What's happening to me?" she whispered. Across the hall, a patient wept in Arabic, and though Rosemary didn't know the words, she understood the pain behind them. For the first time, she realized this wasn't a curse. It was a gift, one that would soon uncover everything hidden in plain sight. Some gifts heal, but this one was about to destroy her illusion of love. Keith started visiting again, flowers in hand, perfume on his shirt. But the warmth in his eyes had faded. His hugs felt like rehearsed gestures. He scrolled through his phone as she spoke, smiling at messages she couldn't see. Or so he thought. When he switched to French on a phone call, Rosemary froze. She understood every word. "Pearl, my love, she's awake, but she won't remember anything. Don't worry." Her hands trembled under the blanket. Each French phrase hit harder than the last. He was still lying, still cheating, still pretending. When he hung up, she forced a weak smile. "You'll stay for dinner." "Can't," he said quickly. "Work." As he left, she turned her face away, tears silent, but eyes sharp. Rosemary had just learned her husband's favorite language, and it was deceit. That night, Rosemary pretended to be asleep when Keith visited. Pearl's name flashed on his phone again. He whispered in French, thinking no one could understand. "I'll see you tomorrow, my darling. She's weak, she won't suspect a thing." Rosemary's blood ran cold. The man who once swore to protect her now plotted behind her back, in a language she shouldn't have known. The next morning, she told Dr. Samuel everything. He listened quietly, concern clouding his eyes. "Rosemary, you need to heal first, don't act yet." But she wasn't just healing, she was planning. She replayed Keith's words in her mind until they became fire. Each syllable built a new version of her, no longer the soft, trusting wife, but a woman reborn in truth. What Keith thought was a secret language would soon become the weapon that ended him. Rosemary's discharge day arrived. Keith drove her home, talking about how everything would go back to normal. She smiled politely, eyes fixed on the passing road. Inside, she was a volcano under snow. At home, she noticed things she hadn't before: Pearl's lipstick shade in the bathroom drawer, her perfume lingering in the air. Keith had erased his guilt with lies, but the house still spoke the truth. That night, while Keith slept, Rosemary sat at the dining table writing. Not a letter, a list. Every clue, every phrase, every secret she'd overheard. For now, she'd stay silent. Let him believe she was still the same woman who loved blindly. But deep within her, the quiet rage was growing, waiting for its perfect moment to strike. The woman who once prayed for peace was about to make war, in every language she'd learned. The drive home felt like stepping into a memory that no longer belonged to her. The boys ran out of the house shouting, "Mummy," and wrapped their arms around her. For a moment her heart softened, love still lived there. Pure and untouched. But behind them, Keith stood in the doorway, smiling like a man playing a part. "Everything's just as you left it," he said. Yet Rosemary noticed small changes: the new painting on the wall, a feminine scarf hanging carelessly on a chair, the faint scent of a perfume she didn't wear. She smiled, "It's beautiful." He kissed her forehead, relieved that she didn't ask questions. But in her mind, every detail was being recorded, quietly, precisely. Later that night, she stood before the mirror and whispered, "You thought I'd wake up blind, but I see you now." The walls that once held love would soon echo with the sound of revelation. Dr. Samuel visited a week later for a follow-up. He found her in the garden barefoot, sunlight brushing her face. "You seem calmer," he said. "I am," Rosemary replied softly. "Calm is good for planning." He frowned. "Planning what?" "Life," she smiled, though her eyes said otherwise. Samuel sensed her quiet storm. "You've been through enough pain, Rosemary. Don't let anger rebuild you." She looked at him. Sometimes anger is the only brick left. He sighed, knowing there was no stopping her, only hoping she'd survive whatever she was preparing for. Before leaving, he handed her a pamphlet. "A language agency is looking for interpreters. You could apply when you're ready." Rosemary traced the logo thoughtfully. Maybe life was handing her not just survival, but a new path. The world was offering her a voice, and she would use it to tell the truth no one wanted to hear. Days turned into quiet observation. Rosemary moved through her home like a ghost who knew every secret hiding in the walls. Keith often stepped out for late meetings. But now she understood his French calls, his careful tone, the lies woven in every sentence. She began recording their conversations secretly, small audio clips, translated into English in a hidden notebook. Each page was a confession he didn't know he'd made. Her heart still ached, but her hands no longer trembled. Pain had become focus. One night she found an email open on his laptop, a love note from Pearl. Rosemary copied it word for word, translating it perfectly into English. "The truth has a sound," she whispered, "and soon everyone will hear it." The betrayed wife had become a silent translator of languages and of lies. The company's annual dinner was the perfect stage. Keith insisted Rosemary attend, parading her like a trophy he still owned. Pearl was there, glittering in silver, her laughter ringing like glass. When their eyes met, Rosemary smiled kindly, extending her hand. "It's nice to finally meet you properly." Pearl hesitated. "Oh, Keith has told me so much about you." "I'm sure he has," Rosemary replied, voice steady as steel wrapped in silk. The entire evening, she played her role, charming, elegant, unbothered. But beneath the surface, every word, every glance was being stored like ammunition. At the end of the night, she leaned close to Pearl and said softly in perfect French, "I hope your conscience sleeps better than my husband does." Pearl froze, face draining of color. Rosemary simply smiled, kissed Keith's cheek, and walked away. For the first time, the mistress realized the wife understood everything. Rosemary spent nights translating more than love letters. She began decoding company documents, messages between Keith and Pearl that hinted at misconduct. It wasn't just infidelity now, it was corruption. She knew revenge wasn't about screaming or tears, it was about precision. She translated their secret French business emails into English and saved them on a flash drive. One evening, as she watched Keith sleeping peacefully, she whispered, "You taught me silence, now I'll teach you consequences." Dr. Samuel called that week to check on her. "How are you holding up?" She smiled faintly. "I'm learning a new language, doctor, the language of revenge." Rosemary was done healing. The next chapter of her life would be written in fire. News of Pearl's promotion hit the office like perfume, sweet to some, nauseating to others. Keith came home that night pretending joy. "Pearl's moving up," he said casually. "She earned it." Rosemary smiled faintly. "I'm sure she did." Inside, she already knew why. She'd read the email Keith sent to his boss in French, recommending her exceptional loyalty. That night, she congratulated him with quiet grace, poured him wine, and listened to him boast. But in her heart, she was no longer a wife. She was a witness, waiting for her moment to testify without words. When he kissed her cheek and whispered, "You're my only one," she smiled back. "Of course, Keith, and you're mine for now." While Pearl celebrated her rise, Rosemary was already designing her fall. Dr. Samuel called unexpectedly. I recommended you for that interpreter job, Rosemary. They're impressed by your recovery story. Her heart lifted. Thank you, doctor. At the interview, the agency tested her, French, Spanish, Yoruba, English. She translated effortlessly. The manager leaned forward. You're extraordinary, we'd like to have you on board. That evening she walked home under the golden sky, papers in her hand, tears in her eyes. For the first time since the accident, she wasn't defined by pain, she was becoming someone new. When she told Keith, he barely looked up from his phone. An interpreter, that's cute. She smiled calmly. Yes, sometimes words can change everything. Keith didn't know those same words would soon be used to destroy the world he'd built. Rosemary slipped easily into her old role, the soft-spoken, trusting wife. She packed Keith's lunches, laughed at his jokes and nodded as he lied. But behind her gentle eyes, calculation brewed. Her new job gave her access to international communication platforms, perfect for monitoring the company where Keith and Pearl worked. She translated business memos, scanned signatures, and learned more about the firm's secrets than Keith ever knew. In the evenings, she wrote in her notebook, part diary, part war map. Each time Keith kissed her goodnight, she whispered, "Sleep well." He didn't hear the silent promise that followed, "Tomorrow I'll wake you up with truth." Rosemary's silence was no longer weakness, it was the sound of a trap closing. It began with a single email. Anonymous, precise, translated perfectly from French to English. It exposed Pearl's misuse of company funds and hinted that Keith knew. The email spread through the office like wildfire. Within hours, HR called emergency meetings. Pearl's face turned ashen, Keith's confidence cracked. At home, he stormed through the door. Someone's leaking information. Rosemary feigned concern. Oh no, how awful. He didn't notice the faint smile tugging at her lips as she handed him dinner. The same dinner she'd served him on the night he first lied about working late. Upstairs. She plugged in her flash drive and saved the next set of evidence, ready for phase 2. The first domino had fallen. The rest would tumble soon, and Keith would never see the hand that pushed them. That evening, Keith sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his temples. I'm being investigated, he muttered. Someone sent my emails to management in English, but I wrote them in French. How? Rosemary looked up slowly. Maybe whoever read them understood you better than you think. He stared, confused. What's that supposed to mean? She met his eyes, calm, unblinking, and spoke flawless French. It means I was never as blind as you hoped. His mouth fell open. You understand French. She stood, her voice steady as steel. I understand everything now, Keith. Every word you whispered to her, every lie you wrapped in another language. For the first time he saw her, truly saw her, and felt fear. The game was no longer hidden. The wife he betrayed now spoke the language of his ruin. Keith barely slept that night. His wife's voice, sharp, flawless in French, echoed in his mind like thunder. By morning his office was chaos. Investigators had arrived, files were missing, accounts frozen. Pearl was pale, whispering in corners. Keith tried to defend her, but the evidence was brutal. Altered invoices, suspicious payments, company secrets sent to private emails. He returned home furious, slamming the door. What did you do, Rosemary? She turned slowly from the window. I just opened your truth to the world, love. You were the one who wrote it. He clenched his fists, trembling. You ruined me. She smiled softly. No, Keith, you ruined us, I just translated it. And for the first time, Keith realized, the woman he'd betrayed now spoke the language of power. Pearl's world crumbled faster than her lipstick could hide. The firm suspended her, pending investigation. Her phone buzzed non-stop, reporters, colleagues, debt collectors. One night she called Keith in tears. They're saying I forged documents, Keith, tell them it was you. He froze, what? But before he could answer, another voice cut in, Rosemary, standing at the door holding his phone. Tell her the truth, Keith, or should I? Pearl gasped through the speaker, Rosemary. Yes, she said calmly, the woman whose life you borrowed, I'm calling it back. She hung up, the silence after was deafening. Pearl lost her job that week. But she wasn't the only one about to fall. Keith's office keys were taken the next morning. His nameplate removed, his bank accounts frozen. He sat on the couch, defeated, watching Rosemary prepare for work, neat, graceful, confident. "Are you happy now?" he asked bitterly. She paused, met his tired eyes. "No, Keith, but I'm free." He laughed dryly. "You planned this from the moment you woke up." She smiled faintly. "Not exactly, I just listened to what you never meant me to hear." As she walked away, her phone buzzed. Dr. Samuel again. "Congratulations, Rosemary," he said. "The agency's giving you a permanent position." As Keith's world collapsed, Rosemary's was just beginning to bloom. The house was quiet that morning. Rosemary packed her things slowly, not in anger but in peace. Her boys hugged her tightly, confused. "Mom, are we leaving Dad?" She smiled softly. "We're going somewhere better, sweetheart, somewhere with light." Keith watched from the doorway, guilt carving deep lines into his face. "I never meant to hurt you," he whispered. She looked back one last time. "You did, but thank you because pain became my teacher." Then she stepped outside, the wind brushing her face, sunlight kissing her skin like freedom itself. Every goodbye carries a rebirth, and Rosemary was walking straight into hers. The new city glowed, bright streets, tall trees, laughter that didn't hide secrets. Rosemary's new office overlooked the ocean. At her desk she wore her headset, translating a live call between French and English speakers, her voice calm, precise, confident. When the call ended, she looked at her reflection in the glass, not the broken woman from before but the reborn one. She whispered softly, "I used to think words were just sounds. Now I know their powers." As she walked out for lunch, her phone buzzed, a message from Dr. Samuel. "Proud of you, Rosemary, you've come a long way." She smiled and replied, "Thank you, doctor. The coma woke more than my body, it woke my truth." And so, the woman who once lost her voice now spoke in every tongue, of strength, justice and freedom. Rosemary's mornings were different now. No chaos, no lies. Just sunlight spilling into her new apartment, the smell of coffee, and the sound of her boys laughing as they got ready for school. She watched them, smiling, the kind of smile that comes from survival, not luck. Each morning she whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude, not for what she gained, but for what she lost. Because in losing the old life, she found herself. At work, she translated a case involving a Spanish mother fighting for her children. Her words helped bridge a gap, and as she watched justice being served, she felt something stir deep within her. For the first time, Rosemary realized her voice could heal others the way it healed her. One evening, her phone rang. The name flashed on the screen, Keith. She hesitated, then answered. "Rosemary, I just wanted to say I'm sorry." She was silent. He continued, voice trembling. "I lost everything, the job, the house, pearls gone. But maybe I needed to. I hope you're happy now." She took a deep breath. "I am, Keith, but not because you lost, because I found peace." There was a pause. "You sound different." She smiled gently. "That's what truth does to people, it gives them a new language." As she ended the call, Rosemary finally understood. Forgiveness isn't for the guilty, it's for the free. At the agency, her story spread quietly, the woman who woke up speaking languages she never learned. Soon, she was asked to train new interpreters, many of them women trying to rebuild their lives. She taught them more than translation, she taught them resilience. Words, she told them, can be a weapon or a bridge, choose to build. Dr. Samuel visited one afternoon. "You've come so far, Rosemary," he said warmly. "You turned tragedy into transformation." She smiled. "Sometimes, doctor, you have to lose your old tongue to learn your truth." Her lessons weren't just in language anymore, they were in living. Months later, Rosemary was invited to speak at a language symposium, her first public speech. As she stepped onto the stage, the lights caught her face. Confidence radiated from her like sunlight after rain. She told her story, the coma, the awakening, the betrayal, the rebirth. When she finished, the crowd rose in applause. Among them, she spotted Dr. Samuel smiling proudly, and beside him, a woman wiping tears, Pearl. Their eyes met. Pearl mouthed, "I'm sorry." Rosemary nodded gently, no anger, just peace. Some wounds don't close with revenge, they heal with release. It was evening. Rosemary walked along the beach near her new home. Waves whispered in languages older than any man. Her sons ran ahead, laughing. She closed her eyes and listened to the ocean, the wind, her heartbeat. Once she had begged for Keith's voice. Now she had her own. She whispered softly, "I thought my accident broke me. But it just translated me into the woman I was always meant to be."